Okay, this is our week 3, module 3. And what we're going to begin with tonight is a conclusion of our discussion from last week, because we stopped a little prematurely last week. We're going to finish our discussion of FBAs and BIPs. I think we were almost finished with FBAs. We may have finished FBAs, but we didn't get to enter into our discussion about BIPs, behavior improvement or intervention plans. The I can stand for both or either. And we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about some classroom management. Was there something else we were going to talk about tonight, Clark?
Positive behavior supports.
Oh, positive behavior supports. That's right. I think we're going to talk about that in between the two other things that I just mentioned. So if we go a little more than an hour and you've got other things you need to do, feel free to jump off. Again, I'm going to reiterate, this is not required. We love it when a lot of people show up because that enhances our discussion, but this is not a required component. But I strongly encourage students to participate and to at least watch if you can't participate, because it will increase your understanding of what we're talking about in the class, what some of the components are of the class, and certainly the PowerPoint that we post that has to do with the topics that are embedded in the class. So if you can't participate, I certainly understand, because again, it's not a requirement that you participate, but I do want you to watch the webinar if you can't participate. And if you can participate,
Tell me I had to be here.
You have to be here. Yes, you do. But if you can't participate, if you can't participate, then you don't have to bother taking any more time to watch it. So that's a good thing. Okay.
So,
yes, Trina.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In case I forget, because I have an old brain here. Where I am so bad with Canvas, I couldn't find, because I wanted to watch the very first one. I missed it. Where on Canvas?
I posted it under module 1.
Okay.
I think toward the top, and it says module 1 webinar. And I forgot to post the second one until either yesterday or this morning. I can't remember when. It may have been today before I actually posted it, because Samantha let me know that she's got some kind of a church commitment on Wednesday nights, and she said, I can't participate. And I said, that's fine. But she had been searching for the second one and couldn't find it. So I realized I had saved it, but I hadn't actually ever finished posting it last week. So I did that, like I say, either last night or today, and it's up under module 2 up toward the top. And it just says module 2 webinar. And that's what I'll do with this one. After we finish tonight, I'll post it under module 3, and it'll say module 3 webinar. Okay. Good question. Anybody else? Okay, let's just dive in, and don't hesitate to just interrupt if you've got questions, because we want to just field those as we go along. Okay. So I'm going to turn the screen over to Clark, the other Dr. Cavan at this point, and let him kind of take it. And that's a good picture of me. I like that.
Sure.
All right, y'all see my screen?
Yes.
So last week,
Yes.
we looked at functions of behavior, and we talked about that behaviors usually meet one of these functions: power control, escape, attention, or acceptance or affiliation. Now, some people have added another to that, and it's revenge. And they say that's separate. Other people think, no, revenge is actually part of the whole power control thing. So you can decide where you want to put that. But to find the function of a behavior, we look at the ABCs. And the ABCs are the antecedents, the behaviors, and the consequences. And as you're considering the consequences, you need to think about, what can that child realistically do? I always think of Bart Simpson, when he's got to write on the board, I will not talk in class or whatever it is he writes on the board, and he's just going through it real fast. I remember having to do that as a child, and I would write I will, you know, I wasn't getting anything out of it. I was just trying to rush through it as fast as I can. But one of the programs that I'm working with right now in a DAP, they have their kids write the 16 Boys Town social skills each day, the first thing they do when they come in. But one of those kids has dysgraphia, and it takes them an hour and a half to 2 hours to do that each day, while other kids are through with it in, you know, 10 to 15 minutes. So is that realistic? We'll talk more about this. Is it fair? Get an adult definition of fair in a little bit. But I want us to realize that as schools, sometimes we do some dumb stuff. Y'all are probably way too young to know Big Chief tablets. But when I was in second grade, we all had to have a Big Chief tablet. Now, Lisa, y'all used a slate and chalk, right?
Yes, we did.
I'm younger than Lisa, so we used Big Chief tablets. But they gave you this red pencil that was, you know, like size of a horse's leg, you know, and you had to try to learn to write with that thing. And then my writing was so bad that the teacher would come over and smack me on the hand. I'm not sure how a hurting hand was supposed to write better than a non-hurting hand, but that's kind of how it was. And, you know, not very realistic expectation. And some dumb stuff, you know, there's other dumb stuff that we do. I've worked with a district before that is real into teaching the elementary school kids cursive writing. So about the time they get printing figured out, then they teach them to write in cursive, and they won't accept anything that's not written in cursive. And then they get to middle school and everything is please type, you know. So it's okay, why did we spend all that time? And I'm not saying, you know, don't use cursive. I think cursive's pretty cool. You know, I think that it'd be really fun to put kids these days in a room with a rotary phone and the instruction on how to use it written in cursive. You know, they'd be just stuck there. But we really do some dumb stuff as schools, and we as educators need to make sure we're using a common sense approach in behavior and consequences that we have for our students. So a simple ABC form is really this simple. You look at behaviors that are happening, and then you look the antecedents, like we talked about last week, the things that happened right before that happened, or the earlier antecedents, which can go back years. You know, some of the reasons we behave the way we do goes back years. Lisa and I met each other at the destruction of both of our marriages. We thought we were happily married to other people when we met in doctoral school, and when we first got together, you know, I was pretty sure she was leaving, because that's what wives do. They leave at some point. And so I was carrying that antecedent of being left before. I was carrying that baggage into our marriage. And we're 22 years in now, and I guess maybe she'll stay, but I'm not totally convinced of that yet. So some of our antecedents can go back decades.
I'm too tired
And
to
then the
leave now,
consequences.
Clark.
What?
I'm too tired to leave, so you don't need
That's
to worry about
good. 'Cause I'm too tired to chase you.
it. Okay.
And the consequences is what happens as a result of that behavior. And those consequences, like we talked about, can be the natural consequence, that can be the logical consequence, or it can be some arbitrary consequence that somebody else is giving. But what we want to do is work with that, and we can either modify the antecedent, we can modify the consequence, or we can teach a replacement behavior to help get rid of the problem behaviors. And we want to make sure that we're including positive behavior supports. Well, what is that? Well, they're research-based. It's a prevention approach. We focus on teaching academic, social, and behavioral expectations. And the emphasis is on culturally appropriate practices. This comes out of the Texas Behavior support initiative that's been around for what, 20 years now or so. But when it came out, it was pretty new and pretty revolutionary. The first thing they said was that we're going to treat all students with dignity and respect, which sounds simple, but it wasn't the way. Students were definitely second-class citizens at best in many districts at that time, and teachers can be very coercive. Teachers can, in fact, there's some research out there that shows in districts that have a lot of bullying problems among the students, the teachers bully the kids and the administrators bully the teachers. So it's just a culture of bullying, and that's not a fun place to work. Did that. All right, so in the behaviors, we have to think, is this a skill deficit or a performance deficit? A skill deficit, I don't know what to do. But a performance deficit is, I know what to do, but I just don't want to. A skill deficit, I don't know how to do that. Performance deficit, I know how, I could do it if I wanted to, but it's just not as fun as something else. A skill deficit says, I would if I could. And a performance deficit says, I could if I would. A skill deficit, I can't, but a performance deficit is, I won't. So when you have a behavior from a kid, you need to look at, is this a skill deficit or is this a performance deficit? Can this child actually do what he's being asked to do? Or is he really wanting to do what he's supposed to do, just doesn't know how to do it? When you're selecting an intervention for, power escape, attention affiliation, you try to find an intervention wherein that child can get the thing that he wants, can get the function that he needs, but in a more socially appropriate way that considers that student's need and ability. And we want an intervention that directly teaches this target behavior. Many years ago, I had a classroom full of a bunch of juvenile delinquents, and one of those kids was really good at desk drumming. I don't know if you've ever seen desk drumming, but some kids are really good at this, and they beat on the top to make one sound, and they hit the metal part on the bottom to make a bass sound, and then they're tapping their foot, and they got all this beat going, and this kid was really good. I think I was just amazed at how good he was because he was so white. I was just couldn't believe he had rhythm like that, because I certainly don't. And all the kids, when he would start drumming, all the kids would get into it. They liked it. So we had to come up with a plan where, hey, and we just use this for a motivator for everybody. Hey, everybody, if we all get our work done in 5 minutes before the bell rings, we'll let Sean give us a concert, on the desk. So it got him what he wanted, got him the attention, and this kid had the most serious ADHD of any kid I've ever worked with. And so he was able to get some wiggles out, get some of his energy taken care of, got him the attention that he liked from doing something that the other kids enjoyed. So it just met all the needs and didn't cost me anything but a few minutes at the end of class. So that's what we're trying to find, is an intervention that meets all those criteria.
Dr. Mr. Cavan, how are we deciphering between you and Mrs. Dr. Cavan?
You can just say Dr. C. Oh no, that's both of us too. Yeah. I'm Clark.
Clark. Okay, I wanted to share with you something that was similar that happened to me. I taught 6th grade math for several years, general ed, and I had a student that wanted to be class clown. I may have told our cohort, that the ones that are in the program that we meet on Saturdays, this already, but he loved attention. And so I had a one-on-one private discussion with him. And his mom was actually a principal at one of the elementary schools within our district. And she actually asked that he be put in my classroom because she knew that I was very patient with kids that were very hyper and had attention issues and things like that. And so I said, hey, I know that you want some attention and I want you to have that attention. So if you're good during math class, the last 5 minutes, I'll let you go to the front and you have to approve the joke, with me ahead of time, make sure it's appropriate. And I will let you do stand up, I'll set the timer for 3 minutes, however many jokes you can get in that I've approved. And so that worked wonders with him. And I was so excited that I figured out a way to let him shine in a positive way, like he was getting that attention in a positive way at the appropriate time. So it's kind of similar to that drumming story that you just shared.
Yeah, that's great. When we come up with interventions, we need to make sure that they're interventions that are going to work in the larger environment. Obviously, the two we're talking about, that happened totally within our classroom and it was fine. I heard a teacher or professor of mine actually that I had a number of years ago, and she talked about a school that she was working with, trying to help them come up with some school-wide interventions. And they had a lot of kids that brought their skateboards to school, and it was always a problem with them having their skateboard there, and they wouldn't fit in their lockers, some of them, and all this other stuff. So she came up with this brilliant idea that they would take red tape and make a lane down the middle of the hallways, and the kids could actually ride their skateboards in the hallways as long as they stayed within that red tape. Well, stupid. I mean, what else can you say? Kids didn't stay in the red lines. People got run over. It just was really not a good plan. I mean, I see what she was getting at. She was trying to help the kids that, and sometimes, the skateboarder type kids are the ones that are left out and that sort of thing. So I get it, but no, we don't skateboard down the hall. We got 1,000 kids walking down the hall. Somebody's going to get, just dumb. And another thing we need to do is make sure that we're communicating and making sure that this plan works for everybody, especially whoever you expect to implement this. One district where I was an assistant principal, we had a kid and the parents said that he needed music therapy. So like, fine, we've got a tape recorder. It wasn't an 8-track, it was a cassette. And so the kid, I think he liked Mozart, if I remember right, and he wanted Mozart therapy. Like, all right, if you bring a cassette of Mozart, and we'll have this tape player set up in our nurse's office, had this back door that you could get in and sit in the back part of the nurse's office. And so we came up with this plan. Everybody was good with it. The parents were excited about it. The kid was excited about it. So the first day that it's supposed to be implemented, this kid goes in the back door of the nurse's office, turns on this tape recorder and just starts blaring this Mozart. Well, nobody had bothered to tell the nurse what was going on. And she just erupted. What are you doing in here? Get out of here. Don't, all this kind of mess. Once we explained what was going on and got him a pair of headphones, and she was fine with it. But we need to make sure that we're communicating and that everybody's on the same page, and that whoever's going to have to actually implement this is there. We never had the nurse in the ARD meeting, so she had no clue what was going on. So make sure all that's going on. You want to teach students the appropriate behavior before problems arise. And we'll actually talk quite a bit about this when we get to the classroom management portion. But sometimes this needs to happen on an individual level. You've got a child that gets frustrated with his work, throws a fit, everybody laughs at him or that kind of thing. Then he's getting the attention that he wants for everybody laughing. So sometimes it's appropriate to work with your whole class and say, we all know that Chad over there has some gets mad sometimes. So we need to make sure that whenever he gets mad, that we're not laughing at him and that we're not playing into that. We're just going to quietly work while he's upset, and then he'll calm down in a little bit. And I've had people say, "Oh, you're telling these other kids that this child has a problem." They already know. I mean, they've got him in class. They've seen him erupt. They already know. So we're not having any kind of a FERPA violation here, because we tell the kids that sometime little Chad has some anger problems. And then we talk about promoting replacement behaviors. And, a good elementary teacher can do something like, "Man, hasn't Chad had a great day today? Let's all give Chad a round of applause." That kind of thing that all those elementary schools are so good at. That and denim jumpers and wood jewelry. Elementary teachers are still good at that, I think.
Dr. Clark, Kevin, I have another quick question. Now that I teach resource and I have smaller groups, and I do have a couple of kids in each of my groups about one in a couple of groups that have behavior issues. And so we've kind of told the other students to do that planned ignoring. And do you think that's okay that we've done that?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
that they
absolutely.
don't, because I told them, I said, when he's making a bad choice, he wants a reaction from someone. And so we're trying to help him make a good choice. And so if we can just keep working and try to ignore it, then hopefully he will make a good choice. And I felt like it's an okay thing to do, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and I'm all for even reinforcing. Y'all did a great job of helping him by not feeding into it. We're going to go to recess 5 minutes early or something, where the class is all rewarded if little Tommy Troublemaker doesn't blow up today. So yeah, that's great. So we want to teach an appropriate behavior that replaces that problem behavior that meets the same function. Sometimes you can use a socially acceptable compensatory behavior. You've all had this kid that's beating on the desk all day with his pen, right? We all know that kid. You can do something as simple as say, instead of hitting the desktop, if you just hit your thigh, that fat part of your thigh right there, it hardly makes any noise. You're probably not going to bother anybody, and your hand still gets to do that same thing that it wants to do. If we were teaching this in a group, I would be standing up at the front and I'd start pointing out that she's shaking her foot right now. That one's swinging her leg because her legs are crossed. This other one's twirling her hair. We as adults all have these little behaviors that we do that are socially acceptable fidgets. Yet we tell the kid with ADHD, sit down and be quiet. It's hard. So we want to make sure that we're teaching appropriate replacement behaviors. Talking about the behavior support plan, which leads up to the behavior intervention plans, you're trying to increase the desired behavior, and you can do that with changing the antecedents is the most effective way to do that. Provide positive consequences and manage inappropriate behaviors. That's the goal. That's what we're working toward. So y'all help me out. All right. We have this situation. The antecedent is that the teacher issues a difficult assignment, passes out the papers. The behavior that we're trying to correct is this child wads his paper up and throws it. Let's say it's math. The teacher hands the math assignment out, kid wads it up, throws it. The teacher says, no. And of course, all the other kids laugh because this kid is throwing his paper and all that. And function is that he's getting attention for that. So how can we modify the task, the antecedent? How can we modify the antecedent to keep this scenario from happening? Ideas?
I would, and for one of my students I can think of particularly, I would go over the task with him prior. So I would say, okay, in math today, this is what we're going to do. And it's going to be like this. So I would break it down into maybe having supplemental aids or manipulatives walk him through it, and then maybe build him up so that when the task does arrive, instead of throwing the paper, he might be able to raise his hand and participate. Even though he's been practiced on it, he's going to feel confident. His peers are not going to laugh at him, and he's not going to gain the attention he wants.
Great. Any other ideas?
I liked Gwen's idea, but I was thinking, what if you did peer partner work so that maybe he felt like he's not doing this difficult task alone? And you could also do what Gwen said with peer partners as well. And so maybe just by having, you know, a friend or someone work on it with him. Now, if it's a test or something like that, of course, you wouldn't be able to do that. But sometimes peer partners helps with kids that feel like they don't have the skills to do the difficult tasks.
Absolutely. Another great idea. Others? Another thing I could do is don't hand him a paper. Give everybody else a paper, and then when everybody else has a paper and they start to work, then I can walk over to little Johnny's desk and sit down with little Johnny and show him the paper there, and then go over it with him before it ever gets a chance to get into his hands to be wadded up and thrown away. Let's look now at modifying.
Is that called extinction?
Extinction is eventually getting rid of that negative behavior. Yes.
Okay, but not, okay, so by not giving him the paper though, that's not actually extinction.
No, it's just a scenario, what's the term? An intervention to make sure that he doesn't continue doing that negative behavior.
Okay.
Clark,
And do you mind going, I was just gonna see if you could go back to the previous screen. I was gonna take a picture of that one where it said increased desired behavior.
Summer, I'm going to post these PowerPoints if you want to. The whole PowerPoint,
one?
the whole PowerPoint will be on
Yes.
the,
Got it, thank you. It'll be on the module thing.
yeah, it'll be on the module. So don't feel like you have to, you know, take fast and furious notes because the whole PowerPoint will be up there. But I mean, feel free to do what you want to as far as note taking is concerned, but just know that the PowerPoint will be up there later to go along with the webinar. But Clark, I was going to ask if you would at some point tonight give a little bit of more information about extinction, because Summer and I were together today doing her test prep. And as all of my students who are in the diagnostician program know, with the exception of Rachel, who'll do her test prep later this week, there's a couple of questions on the practice test that they've been going over that have an item about extinction on there. And I don't know a whole lot about that. And if you could maybe just at some point in the next little bit, talk about what that really means when we talk about an extinction technique, because that particular test item or two have thrown us a little bit. And Gwen has her hand up.
Yes, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and extinction. Those we went through really fast last week. And so I think all of us would love like examples of those.
Yeah, if you could
How
do
they're
that.
different.
Yeah.
Okay.
You could spend just a few minutes maybe on that before we move on to the next. Finish this thing that you're doing right now. I like this, but take a few minutes before we move on to the next big topic to do that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have the same scenario here. The difficult task, the kid wadding up his paper and throwing it. But this time, let's change the consequence. Still meet the same function, but let's change the consequence instead of changing the antecedent. What you got? We all got quiet.
Well, if you're doing like a token economy in your classroom, you could take a token away like if you're doing the ticket system and all that, that's something you could do.
Yep. Certainly could. I think this is a great place to use the scenario that she was talking about a while ago, where we talk to our peers and say, look, if he throws his paper, you just keep working on yours. Don't laugh. Don't, he's having an issue right there with that paper. So y'all just leave it alone. And that actually is an extinction technique. He's wanting the peers to laugh at him. And there's a saying that we have in behavior, it's always better to be bad than to be dumb. So this could be that the kid is really frustrated with the math, thinks he's going to fail it anyway. And instead of everybody knowing that he can't do it, he'd rather they think that he's just a bad kid and he doesn't give a what, and he's just going to wad his paper up and throw it. So instead of the teacher correcting him every time this happens and the peers laughing, we're going to stop the peers laughing, which hopefully will extinguish this throwing the paper. We've also, modified the antecedent, which is going to help give him some strategies and even possibly not giving the opportunity to have this paper until somebody is there with him to help him, either a peer or the teacher. And then what could the teacher do instead of just correcting him after he does this?
Sometimes I've realized that if I delay my response to, or my reaction, I guess, like you said, do the planned ignoring and let the students know ahead of time that we're going to ignore this. And then later on, address it, maybe when the student is in a more neutral state of mind and not when they are trying to save face per se, or you know what I mean? Because honestly, that's probably like what you were saying. If they don't know how to do it, they would rather look cool and make the kids in the class laugh than look like they don't know, like they're dumb, like what you said. So I think sometimes instead of reacting right away, is just to ignore it and continue on with the lesson, and then maybe have a one-on-one conversation later.
Yeah, very good. I was going to tell a story about this, but my background on some of this stuff comes from such different place than y'all that what I did would not be appropriate at all in the classes that most people are in, but it had a great effect in the class that I was in. But we'll skip that because we're going to run out of time, and it makes me use a lot.
I have a student that does this often and doesn't do it anymore. And we used to say, like, because I was the collaborative teacher in the classroom, and so he was kind of mine, emotionally disturbed. And I would say, okay, obviously, I'm going to say Tommy, because you did. Tommy wants to have a snowball fight. So at the end of class today, when everybody completes numbers 1 through 6, we are all going to write down the question that we didn't like the most, or what we didn't enjoy about today's lesson, on a piece of paper. We'll crumble it up. We're going to have a snowball fight, but it's the last 5 minutes of class, and you can't participate unless, like, I would kind of make it a group thing. And then
awesome.
He was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I want to play too, so I'm going to do my work. And then, I mean, we've done that.
Never heard that before. That's great. Like it. All right. So we've looked at changing the antecedent. We've looked at changing the consequence. Now let's look at teaching a behavior replacement. By that, I'm saying, okay, little Tommy, every time I give you a paper, you wad it up and throw it. I understand that you're frustrated, and I understand you don't like math, and I understand you want your friends to, see it. Obviously, this is a conversation I'm having with him by himself. So from now on, if I give you a paper and you get frustrated and you think you want to wad it up and throw it, I want you to And then I give him a replacement behavior. Right now, monkey noodles are a big thing. So I say, okay, every time you get, I'm going to give you this monkey noodle to keep in your desk. And every time you get frustrated and you want to throw something, I want you to just don't touch the paper. Just leave the paper alone, play it like it's not there. And you get out your monkey noodle and you squish him until, and as soon as I see that you're squishing him, I'll get the other kids taken care of, and then I'll come help you so that you don't have to be frustrated and wad that paper up. So that's the type of thing we're talking about where we teach a replacement behavior. Other ideas on replacement behaviors? Y'all got better ideas than I do. I'm not gonna milk you for these. We just got to keep going.
Mine are in 32 instructional weeks. Before, when given a difficult task, Tommy will go to his cool off place instead of
Okay.
write on his paper, and like that, the goal
Yeah.
that we're working on. So we want to find him a cool off place where he can go to kind of chill out, maybe reduce his assignments 50%, walk by and cross out 2 and whisper, you don't have to do these 2, where he's like, ooh, ha ha ha, ha, I have one up on everybody else in here. So he might do 2 to show that he understands the concept and you can move on.
Till he starts bragging about that and the other kids, I want to less.
True.
Yeah. Good ideas.
Bits at a time, you got little bits.
Sorry.
Can you use the Boys Town, like the Boys Town, I don't know if the rules or the sayings
Social
where
skills?
you look at the person. Yeah. Can you use those as replacement behaviors so that they know what to do in
Oh,
situations?
absolutely. Yeah, we're going to talk about that some when we get to classroom management. But yeah, especially for if they have a very specific behavior, like the kid that yells out to get the teacher's attention, you teach them, okay, here are the steps to getting the teacher's attention appropriately. It is 1, you look at the person and you explain, you're looking at the person to make sure that the teacher's looking at you. You don't want to sit there with your hand up for a long time and the teacher not even looking at you. So you look at a person, you raise your hand. That way the teacher knows that you need help. Then you wait for acknowledgement. You don't start jumping up and down or start yelling because she doesn't see you or can't get you right your way because got 20 other kids in the room. So you look at the person, you raise your hand, you wait for acknowledgement, and then when the teacher does call your name, then you state your request, politely. So that's the task analysis, the breakdown of getting the teacher's attention, and you teach that as a replacement behavior for yelling out to get the teacher's attention. Absolutely.
Dr. Kevin, is that like Father Flanagan's Boys Town in Omaha?
It is. Mhm.
Thank you.
That's what it came out of.
I'll look it up. Thank you.
Yeah, you can Google Boys Town, you can Google skill streaming, and teachers have, and teachers pay teachers and all these different things. Teachers have stolen these for years, and so they're out there in all sorts of non-copyrighted formats. So you can find them, if you're going to use them, buy the book at some point, but you can get a good look at them before having to purchase anything. All right, factors that influence behaviors, environmental factors. I remember I think it was the second year that I was an assistant principal in a middle school. How some moms will bring their kids up for the first day of school. And this mom showed up on the first day of school. All the kids are in the gym and we're going to, call out their names, tell them which teacher to go to and all that. This mom shows up first day of school and she's wearing a t-shirt that says, "Don't like my attitude, dial 1-800 eat shit." And I'm thinking, all right, what did you decide not to wear that's in your closet? I mean, you actually thought, okay, I'm going to my daughter's school for the first day of school and I'm going to wear my eat shit t-shirt. I mean, so do we expect this kid to not use curse words? Obviously, that's part of their home. It's the environmental factors. It was weird that year because I did not know who that mom belonged to, but we had a office aide, this sweetest little girl, and she was just one of my favorite kids. It's this wonderful kid that worked in the office, I think fourth period or something. And just anything you needed, she was helpful to do it and take message, all that kind of stuff that the office aides did. You never had to worry about her causing any problems. Then on open house, I see this kid walking with Miss Eatshed. I'm thinking, there's no way you two are related, because that mom is awful and this is the sweetest kid in the world. So these environmental factors that influence the kid, we can't really do anything about. There are cultural norms, especially when you're in a multicultural environment, that you need to be aware of. I had a teacher that was working with us one year, and every time she had this little boy named Benjamin or something like that, and every time that he got in trouble, he was a little Hispanic kid, and every time he got in trouble, he would stare at the floor, and she kept telling him, "You look at my eyes, you look me in the eyes, look at my eyes." And he'd look up, and then he'd look right down at the floor. And she finally came to me and says, "Dr. Calvin, I've got this, I have a lot of trouble with this kid. And every time that I'm correcting him, he just stares at the floor. Is there any way that could be cultural?" I was like, absolutely, that's cultural. A lot of Hispanic kids are taught, and when I've taught this in different college settings, I always like to get a show of hands. Okay, y'all that are Hispanic, were you taught to look at the floor, look in the eyes? And it's usually about 2/3 are taught to look at the floor when they're being scolded, and only about 1/3 are taught to look at the person's eyes who's scolding them. So you have that.
I think, isn't it true that that's in the Asian community as well? Occasionally.
Anybody have any information on that? I had an Asian kid last year that acted up all the time. He didn't have any trouble looking in my eyes, but it may very well be. I'm not sure. That's the only kid I've ever had that ate
No,
the
it's
fly in
usually Asian
class.
girls don't, I mean, it's normal. There's a big difference between how Asian boys react and how Asian girls react, just because of their placement in their culture.
Okay. Good to know. So, it's one of those things of kind of getting to know your culture, but more importantly, getting to know the individual student, to learn about that. And that certainly comes in when you have psychiatric issues or mental illness going on, different personality issues. But I think so much of behavior is a tolerance issue. And by tolerance, I mean the tolerance of the teacher. My mother and I taught special ed at Western Hills High School at the same time. And so she was part of the department that I was in. And I would go in her class, and it was like, y'all ever see reruns of Leave It to Beaver? She ran her class like Leave It to Beaver's class. The kid had to raise their hand. They had to stand up when they were going to speak and all this other stuff. It just drove me nuts. But she would come over to my class where I had these kids that, had all sorts of behaviors, and she would go nuts in there. She couldn't tolerate what they were doing. But it really didn't bother me. So a lot of it is tolerance. You got to kind of decide, are you going to, I don't cuss. I don't use swear words, other than when I'm doing presentations, obviously. But if I stopped class every time I had a hell or a damn, I would not get anything done. Now, obviously, in a normal classroom with good kids around, then you've got to have a different attitude than I did. But I was like, okay, I'll deal with the F-bombs, but as far as the hells and damns and the occasional shit, and I'm going to say, don't be a potty mouth, and then we're just going to move on, because I'm not going to spend my whole day correcting every 4-letter word I hear. So you got to think about your tolerance, and Is that something I can build up a tolerance for, or is that something I cannot tolerate at all and shouldn't tolerate? And there obviously are things that you should not tolerate. All right. So that takes us through that. And Lisa, you want to entertain questions while I get the next one fired up? You still here, Lisa?
Yeah, I had to go off of mute, so that just took me a sec. Anybody have any questions? And remember, Clark, I want you to talk about extinction
Or, okay.
before we get into this next phase. Or as somebody asked a minute ago, was it Summer or Gwen asked about the four things that you talked about last week that we want to just revisit for a minute, and extinction was among those. You said, Gwen, you said positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, something, and extinction. What was the other one?
Punishers, I think.
Was it
Yes,
punishers?
punishment, positive, negative, punishment, and extinction. Just maybe an example or how they're different.
Yeah,
Okay, so positive reinforcement is what we usually think of as an award. It's giving them something for doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the thing about reinforcers, the reinforcer makes something more likely to happen again, where a punisher makes something less likely to happen again. And the punishers in extension, if you use one to try to eliminate a particular behavior, then that becomes extinction. When you have punished that behavior often enough that the student no longer does it, that's an extinction technique. And you can use a positive punishment where you give them a consequence, or you can use a negative punishment. Example. Sometime when I lean over to kiss Lisa, she will lick me in the face.
oh, I do not.
Now, I don't like it when she does that. So what she's doing is punishing me for trying to kiss her. And if she did it consistently, she would extinguish my behavior of trying to kiss her.
And I don't
That
lick
makes
you.
sense?
I just kiss you in a silly way. That's all I do. It's not an actual lick. It's just
It's
a silly
gross.
kiss. It's just a silly kiss. You're going to give my students the wrong impression of me.
So,
I
Dr.
think they already know.
Can a positive reinforcement. So I have a student, and every time she does this, I give her that. And then 2 Mondays from now, I say, okay, every 2 times you do this, you get that. Are you trying to create like an intrinsic reward and then that becomes extinction, or not? Positive doesn't become extinction?
A reward never becomes extinction.
Thank you.
Extinction has to do with extinguishing a bad behavior.
Thank you. Okay. I was thinking I needed to like phase out the reward so that it becomes intrinsic.
You do want to phase out rewards at some point, but and I've heard people say that they're extinguishing the rewards, but that's not what Mitch Yell is talking about in this book. He's talking about extinguishing a bad behavior.
Thank you.
Okay, so Clark, revisit that for just a second. So you can
Okay.
extinguish a behavior negatively or positively.
Right.
Okay, so explain that again, because I'm still not getting it.
Okay. So a behavior that we want to get rid of. What's a behavior in a class that really irritates you?
Well, can I give an example
Uh,
from that test today?
How
No,
about,
no, you can't, because we still have one person that needs to take it.
how
Okay.
about if a student, like from the module, the Iris module, little Joseph, who yells out every time somebody says something.
All right,
So
so we want to extinguish, and we want to be very specific. We want to extinguish the student yelling out every time somebody says something.
yes,
Is he yelling in response to what they say? Is he
Yes.
yelling at the person?
he's
Or is he
making,
just yelling about the whole situation?
He's
just
joking
been-
around. He's being the
he's-
comedian.
right, he's sarcastic, he's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's an attention-seeking behavior.
correct.
Okay, so we want to extinguish that behavior. You said it was Joseph?
Yes.
Yes, his name is Joseph.
Okay. So what does he get by yelling out?
Laughter from
He
the
gets attention
classmates.
He's
from the
getting
kids.
attention.
Right. So what we want to do, because that attention, every time he gets that attention, it is reinforcing him, making him more likely to do that again.
Correct.
So we want to extinguish that behavior. So we need to get our other kids helping us because they're the ones rewarding him. So we need to teach them to not play into that. So we've got to extinguish their reinforcing his bad behavior because their reinforcement of his bad behavior is bad behavior on their part. So we're trying to extinguish their bad behavior of supporting and reinforcing his bad behavior. And that's going to help him not get what he wants out of that. At the same time, we can teach the replacement behavior. We can teach him, if you want to say something, we're going to allow you to say something, but you've got to do it like everybody else. And here are the steps to getting attention. Look at the person, raise your hand, wait for acknowledgement, and then state it, and we want you to state it in a pleasant voice tone. We don't want you yelling it out. So as we continue to do that, and we're using planned ignoring by the kids, we're teaching them to ignore, and then we can do the things like y'all have talked about, like rewarding the whole class when he makes it through a day without yelling. And we can even set goals like that. We can help the kid monitor by saying, okay, here's a piece of paper, and I want you to make a little tick mark on here every time that you yell out. And then you tape that down on his desk so he doesn't lose it. And then you take it up at the end of the day, put another one down, and then you have several days worth of that. And you can say, look, this day you shouted out 20 times, but yesterday, only 2 times, man. I'm so proud of you. That's great. Here, have a gummy bear, whatever motivates the kid. So we are extinguishing that bad behavior, but what we're really doing is reinforcing getting the teacher's attention appropriately. Does that help?
So that's
Yeah,
a positive.
So if he's yelling out, okay, so if he's yelling out, what's the positive reinforcement?
I am not giving him a positive reinforcement for yelling out. Currently, the positive
Offer one if
reinforcement
he
is the
doesn't.
students laughing at it. That's how he's being reinforced, and that's why he's wanting to do it again, because
Okay.
he gets the laughter.
So what's the negative reinforcement?
The negative reinforcement,
Is like timeout or 5 minutes out of recess?
we
or-
don't really have a negative reinforcement in this scenario. A
Okay.
negative reinforcement is something that I take away, but it makes the behavior more likely to occur. For example, Lisa's mother likes to go out to eat at nice places. So we take her out sometime to go eat someplace. And when we do, she sits down to eat and she takes this little bottle of green pills and she eats like 10 of them. What are those things called, Lisa?
They're Imodium.
Imodium, yeah.
Why are
And
you
she'll
telling
eat-
all these stories on my family? You need to get some.
It's
new
the only
food.
family I know. So she takes all of
Okay,
these
I'll help.
Imodiums.
I misunderstood and I'll let you move on. I thought every behavior had a way to give positive reinforcement, a way to give negative, a way to punish, and a way to extinct. But
No.
I'm wrong. Okay. Thank you.
But I want you to finish that story, Clark. Tell me what's
Okay.
the point of that story?
So the negative reinforcement is it takes away her subsequent diarrhea, which would be her consequence for eating this Mexican food. So it reinforces her ability to go eat Mexican food again, because we take away the negative consequence of having diarrhea every time we eat Mexican food by popping Tenamodium.
Okay.
So we're reinforcing the behavior by taking away something that's unpleasant.
Taking
makes
away the
sense?
negative consequence. Okay, I get it.
Decreasing the behavior by taking something away.
No, a reinforcer always increases the behavior.
Oh, increases the behavior. Okay. No, I was
But here we're
thinking,
increasing the behavior by taking away something. Yes.
In answer to
Oh.
Gwen's question, there are positive reinforcers, there are negative reinforcers, there are punishers, and there are extinguishers. But those don't occur all in one scenario. They occur in different scenarios. They're just possibilities that may occur in various scenarios.
Right.
Does that help, Gwen?
Yes, but they're not possible scenarios of the same behavior.
No. You might have some positives and some negatives, or you might have some positives and some punishers, or you might have some positives or some negatives and some extinguishing behaviors, but you don't necessarily have all four. In fact, you probably
Gwen,
won't have all four.
I think once you figure out what's driving the behavior, like if it's escape or attention or control, then you'll be able to figure out which one goes with it in a way. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah,
You can. Yeah.
good. Okay, Clark, I'll turn it back to you and you can carry on. And if
It's 8 o'clock.
Yeah, we didn't start till about 10 after. But if anybody needs to pop off, they can go ahead and get off, but we're going to keep going because we need to record this and people can watch it later if they need to. Okay, but we're going to keep going.
okay, because it's my birthday's tomorrow and I'm getting ready. I'm gonna go out for a minute and at about 8:30. So
You go, Trina. Okay. And tomorrow is also our son's birthday. So he's going to be 35.
that's right. We
And
do
the
share a
granddaughter.
birthday.
That's right. And
Yes.
so are you. 35 for you too, right? Happy
Yes.
birthday.
No, 25. 25.
25. Okay. Happy birthday, Trina.
Trina. Where are we
have a
going
good-
tonight?
Have a good
No.
evening.
You know what? Actually, I'm really fat. I'm going to Walmart because I have a student in one of my groups. We share the same birthday. So for the last 3 years, he and I have celebrated with the group. So I'm going to go get him a little something.
Oh, you are
that's sweet.
precious. Okay, we'll talk to you later, okay? And anybody else that needs to go, feel free. It does not offend us if you sign off, but we're gonna keep going because we need to get this recorded. And then you can watch it at your leisure later if you need to sign off, okay?
Okay, thank
So
you.
go ahead, okay? Clark, you continue, please. Thank you.
All right. So we're looking at classroom management strategies for improving academic performance. We always want to remember that we don't control behaviors for the sake of controlling behaviors. We're managing our classroom in order to improve the academic success of our students. When bad behavior is going on, it makes it hard for the kid that's causing the problem, but also for everybody else that's in that class. So if you're a teacher currently, maybe these will help you help your students, but many of you I know are working to become diagnosticians, and like it or not, there are people that will see you as an expert, and those teachers that are struggling, hopefully you'll have some advice that will help them. So one of the things that a diagnostician is supposed to be able to do is talk about the educational implications of this disability. So if we're talking with kids with emotional and behavior disorders, then you want to talk about how this prevents them sometimes from being in the classroom, and they miss out on learning and all that kind of thing. So hopefully these will be tools that will help you. We're going to skip over some of that. I had a student 1 year, 2 years actually, that had schizophrenia, and I had a free writing assignment, and she wrote, it was about 3 notebook pages worth that followed this very pattern here. This is just an excerpt from the end of it. I'm sitting here listening to nothing particular. I'm sitting here waiting for nothing particular. I'm sitting here thinking nothing particular. I'm sitting here looking at nothing particular. I'm sitting here hating nothing particular. I'm sitting here admiring nothing particular. I'm sitting here dreaming nothing particular. I'm sitting here laughing at nothing particular. I'm sitting here being nothing particular. I'm sitting here nothing particular. And I think you can hear in that the dearth of worth that this child had. We know that kids that have emotional and behavioral problems have a feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. They get frustrated, they feel isolated, they feel like they're not understood by others, and they just want out. And we know they want out because we see that the suicide rate among these kids is worse than among the general population. But what about the teachers? The teachers that work with these kinds of kids often are frustrated. They feel a sense of isolation. Other people don't understand what they're doing. They want out. Talk about open house. Nobody ever came to my room for open house. I had one parent walk in there one time and look around, and I said, "Sir, can I help you?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm just seeing if you actually have chains and handcuffs on the wall." It's like, no, I mean, this is a school. What makes you think that? Well, I've heard stories, So they don't understand what we're doing and the types of kids that we work with. We've talked about this a few weeks ago, but you have the misbehavior, and from the misbehavior, get a discipline referral that leads the kid to be removed from class, to go to the office or be an ISS or off-campus suspension or whatever. They miss instruction, and because they miss instruction, they don't grasp the concept. Then we ask them about the concept, and it's better to be bad than dumb. So they misbehave again, and this whole thing just keeps going to the point that they have giant holes in their learning because they've spent so much time out of class. We talked how the behaviors have a purpose. They meet a need: power control, escape avoidance, attention, acceptance, maybe revenge, and they can be changed. We talked about the ABCs, but also behaviors are not easily understood. We don't know all the time why a kid's doing something. The kid certainly doesn't know why he's doing it, but that doesn't change the fact that there is a purpose. One of the things that I believe is that good teaching is good teaching. Students with emotional behavior disorders have the lowest outcomes of any of the disability groups. And it's not for a lack of ability, it's their lack of social skills, their lack of people skills. Teachers who are afraid of kids with autism. The scary thing about autism is the way the kids act. It's the behavior. So all of this plays into it. And then you think about even a student with learning disabilities. I mean, we have kids that act bad that are not labeled emotionally disturbed. They may be labeled with a learning disability. They may be have an intellectual disability. Well, many kids need direct instruction in school appropriate social skills, just like they need direct instruction in academics. And they learn early on it's better to be bad than to be dumb. You can manage your classroom without coercion, with less stress, to get academic achievement from engaged students so that you can be a successful teacher. This is one of our grandsons a number of years ago, and you can tell he's kind of a toot. We call him our little imp, and it's cute when he's 3, but when he still does that and he's 10 years old in 4th grade, and not cute anymore. So I like to talk about the 5 Ps: the procedures, the preparation, the performance, the personality, and the prevention. Y'all have probably never heard of a Yankee screwdriver. That's a picture of a Yankee screwdriver. I used to build things with my grandfather all the time. He was a builder, and he always had a Yankee screwdriver. He could do with a Yankee screwdriver what I do now with a power drill. It was amazing what all he could do with that. But it was his tool. And the thing about it is, if that's your only tool, then you're going to have problems. So we want to stock the toolbox, and basically what we have here are like that word gleaned, hints and tips that we've gleaned. Now, this is stuff I've stolen from other teachers and from teachers that I've seen work and things that do work. We need to teach procedures. I've had teachers say, by the time they get to me, they ought to know the rules for sharpening the pencil. Which rules? Teachers out there, tell me what the procedure is for sharpening pencils in your class. Quickly.
It's not allowed. I don't allow pencil sharpening in my classroom.
Don't allow it at all.
Flat out, not allowed.
Who else?
I have quite a few sharpened pencils ready, and I'll just trade with the student, and then at the end of class I'll trade back, and then they can sharpen their pencil.
Okay. Anybody else?
I had it as a job. One of my behaviors. That was one of his behaviors. He liked to get out of doing work, sharpen pencils. So at the end of the day, he had to sharpen pencils because that's what he wanted to do. That's what he worked for. But he had to listen for sound, because if you put it in an electrical pencil sharpener, when it makes a different sound when it gets sharp. So once you hear it change, that's when you know it was sharpened. And I told him he can't do it any more than that, or he'd lose his job.
So we got 3 different teachers, 3 different procedures. Hey, guess what?
Well, yeah,
There's no
that's what I
national
do.
policy on sharpening pencils. Everybody does it differently. So you need to teach the procedure that you want to happen in your room, unless, of course, you have a school-wide procedure, in which case they need to know that. But think about, your average 6th grader going to go to 8 different classes, and each one of those different classes could potentially have a different procedure for sharpening pencils. So don't just say, oh, they ought to already know. I'm not going to waste my time teaching that. You need to teach the procedures. You need to teach what's the procedure for handing in papers. Same kind of thing. Some people hand them up. Some people hand them across. Some people have a box that you put your finished work in. Some of them you put it in a folder and then put your folder in a cubby. There's all different procedures for that. Sharpen pen. What's the procedure for going to the restroom? Do you have to get a pass? Do you have to sign out? Can you just go whenever you want to? Can you only go at passing period? I mean, the school I was in the last 2 years, you could not go during passing period because they didn't want kids congregating in there and spreading COVID and cooties. So you could only go during class time. What is the procedure for getting the teacher's attention? Do you always have to look at the person, raise your hand, wait for acknowledgement, and state your request politely? Or is there some time when I can just call out? I used to have to talk to my kids. All right, this is a discussion time. You don't have to raise your hand. Just when nobody's talking, if you want to talk, talk. Don't talk when others are talking, because then I can't understand you. All right, now we're testing, so nobody talk. The only time you can talk, you raise your hand, I'll come to you and we'll talk quietly. So we have to teach, how do you get the teacher's attention at this particular time? Lining up. Are we going to go in age order? Are we going to have a student of the week? Are we going to put girl, boy, girl, boy? We're going to have all the girls first and the boys later. How are we going to line up? All of these procedures have to be taught. When I was a principal at Staples Elementary in Joshua, our mascot was the owls. So we told all the kids, put a bubble in your mouth and put your owl in its nest. And then they put their owl in their nest putting their hands behind their back with their bubble in their mouth. So you had these kids walking down the hall with their hands behind their backs and their cheeks blown up in a bubble. It worked. But you've got to teach the procedures. I think the first few days of school, if you will spend time teaching procedures, you will have much more time in the long run for academics than if you don't teach the procedures and you're having to do that constantly as you go. I also think you need to teach those behaviors every time you come back from a break of more than a day or two. Every time spring break, winter break, any break of more than a couple of days, revisit those procedures. And then we talk about the school-wide procedures like the one I just talked about in walking in the hall. What is the cafeteria? What are their expectations in the cafeteria? Can I sit anywhere I want? Do I have to sit in a assigned seat? Am I allowed to talk during lunch, or do I need to be quiet? Can I only talk after I finished eating? And after I finished eating, then I go outside? Or do I go, all of that you've got to teach the kid. Restroom procedures. How do we act in the auditorium? What about arrival and dismissal? Do we all stay in the classroom, or does the rabbit bus go to the gym and the car riders go to the auditorium? All of those things you have to think about and teach the students, because they're different every place that they go. Timeout. We all know the signal for timeout. So let's think about how that might apply with our kiddos. Random thought here. I used to use homework passes and don't strain my brain days. I would give each child a homework pass at the beginning of the semester. And on that homework pass, they had two options. They could use it as a don't strain my brain. So they come in, they just had a horrible day. They didn't get any sleep last night. They're not feeling well. You hand me that, and I don't expect anything out of you today. You sit in your desk, you be quiet, you don't bother anybody, and I won't bother you. I'm not going to strain your brain. You've given me that homework pass. But at the end of the semester, if you still have your homework passes, and I would also give them out at times as a reward, if you still have your homework pass, I will trade that for a 100 on any assignment. So you can turn it into me and get a 300 on any assignment. So those are the homework passes, and the don't strain my brain days can help those kids. Sometimes as adults, we just need a day. And we have appropriate ways of doing that. We have inappropriate ways of doing that too. We can call in sick if we're not sick, but we have options. Kids a lot of times don't have the option. Mom doesn't have anybody stay home with the kid. I don't care if you feel bad, you're going to school. All right, let's not make a bad situation worse and have this kid blow up. Let's let him use this don't strain my brain day. Also with the kid that we talked about earlier that got frustrated with his work, all right, we can teach that kid a signal. If you're really frustrated and you think you're about to blow, you just shoot me a timeout sign real quick, and I'll just back off. Or maybe your timeout is like somebody said, you go sit over in this area, or maybe they have a teacher that they had last year that's really good with them, and they can go visit that teacher for a second or something like that. So some sort of a signal. Also, that kid that struggles, but you want them to be a part of the class, you can teach that child, hey, you know what? I know that sometimes I ask you questions and you don't know the answer and you get frustrated, and sometimes my words get mixed up and I can't talk as fast as I'm thinking, and I know that happens to you too. So here's the deal. I'm never going to call on you unless I've walked over and I'm standing directly in front of you. And I won't do that unless I'm pretty sure you know what we're talking about. And in that case, I'm going to stand in front of you, and then to be thinking, because I might ask a question to the whole class, but you be thinking of the answer because I'm standing right in front of you. That means I'm going to call on you. And that's our secret. None of the other kids know we're going to do that. So those are a couple of ways you can use break signals to where that kid knows that you as a teacher are looking out for them. When the horse is dead, dismount. Sometimes we come up with lesson plans. We think, man, this is going to be such a great lesson. And we get there and they just go flat. It's not working. the kids aren't into it. You know, when I was a young teacher, I would take that so personally. It's like, I worked long and hard on this lesson, and by golly, we're going to do it. Don't bother. You know, if that lesson plan's not working, then figure out a different way. We want to keep the kids engaged. And when they're not buying it the way that you're trying to teach it, or they're not understanding it, then, you know, come up with another way. Another thing is the curriculum of the moment. I walked into my class one time. I had gone down to the office to take, so I walked into my class, and when I got in there, one of my students was standing on top of a table, and he had a chair over his head, and he was about to fling it down at some other kids. Now, the lesson that I had on the board for that day was the Pythagorean theorem. But the Pythagorean theorem didn't really matter a whole lot at that point. The curriculum of the moment was, what do we do when we're so mad that we want to hit a kid with a chair, and we're so enraged that we're standing on top of a table with the chair above our heads? So you've got to, we'll actually come back to that scenario in a little while, and I'll tell you what actually happened that day. But the curriculum of the moment sometimes is way more important than whatever you have in the lesson plans. And then fit the system to the kid. You know, we talk a lot about, well, in my day, you know, your day really doesn't count anymore. Especially my day doesn't count anymore. You know, things are so different now. So make sure you're fitting the system to the kid. Kids are good at technology. Let's use it. You know, kid likes to read. Let's use that. Now, that whole curriculum at the moment, don't think, well, you know, I'm just going to go into school tomorrow. In fact, from now on, I'm not even going to have lesson plans. I'll just use the curriculum at the moment. No, you'll get you killed. Be prepared. Plan well, plan too much. Make sure that you've got too much planned every day, because dead time is deadly. If they're not actively engaged in academics, then they will be actively engaged in misbehavior. But if they are actively engaged in academics, then they are disengaged in misbehavior. Those are two, I just went blank on the term, mutually exclusive. Those are two mutually exclusive behaviors. You cannot be actively engaged in academics and actively engaged in misbehavior at the same time. Make sure that you have extra individual activities at all times. If this kid is finished, what else is there for them to do, rather than sitting there to the point that they get bored and start to misbehave. Bounce pass, not that kind of bounce pass. A bounce pass, and I think it's interesting. Mitchell used this in his book, and one of his co-authors is Nancy Meadows. And Nancy Meadows was my major professor when I was getting my master's degree. And when the term that he uses is antiseptic bouncing. And when somebody first wrote an article with that term in it, Nancy showed it to us as a class, and we all laughed and said, "What is that?" But it's something teachers have done for a long time. But whoever this author was, I don't remember it now, but whoever that researcher was, gave it the name antiseptic bouncing and wrote an article about it, and boom, they got credit for it. But basically, it's a pass that I write, and it may be, you know, little Tommy over there is ADHD. I know that he's got the wiggles, and he needs to get some of those wiggles out. So I will write a note to another teacher and said, "Hey, little Tommy needed to get the wiggles out. Please just sign this and return it." And then I will fold it up, staple it, hand it to little Tommy and say, "Take this to Mrs. Green." So he thinks he's real important because he's getting to deliver a message for me to another teacher. Mrs. Green looks at it. She hides her smile because she knows what's going on, because we've worked this out ahead of time. And so she signs it and says, you know, "How's your day going today, little Tommy Troublemaker?" And he says, "Oh, I'm doing okay." And so he's had the opportunity to work the wiggles out. Yeah, I know he's probably not going to go straight to Miss Green's class, and he probably stop through the restroom. He might get a drink of water. He might even run by the cafeteria or look who's in the library. That's fine. He's not causing any problem for me. He's not really causing a problem in hallways. He's getting the wiggles out. He comes back and he should be better able to do his work. You are, as a teacher, you are performing. You want to get their attention. Do something at the beginning of class that will get their attention and then keep their attention. Make sure that the learning is relevant. I've learned with my high school boys that if I could make the lesson about girls or cars, I had it. If I couldn't figure out a way to make the lesson about girls or cars, then we were going to have a problem. But what I did learn is if I made every lesson as best I could about girls or cars and kept it interesting for them, then sometime when I couldn't figure out a way to make it interesting, I'd say, hey guys, I have tried to make this interesting. Y'all know I always try to make it about cars because we like cars, but I just couldn't figure out a way to do it. But the state says that we have to learn this. So y'all just stick with me and let's get through this real quick, and then we'll get on to something more fun. And they bought that. They would work with me on that because they knew that I did try. You either need to like your kids or at least be really good at acting like you like your kids. I had a teacher one time, and the mom came up with her daughter who had a learning disability, and she had a packet of like 40 pages stapled together that this teacher had given this kid, and the kid, Mandy, was just totally overwhelmed. And the mom says, I don't know what it is. Mandy says that this teacher just doesn't like her, and surely that's not the case, but she's frustrated. She looks at this, she's overwhelmed, she can't even start. So we went on with our conference and sent them on their way. And then the teacher, I called the teacher or went down to talk to the teacher, and I said, Mandy thinks that you don't like her. And she says, I don't. What? No, that's not acceptable. You can't not like the kid. You at least have to fake it like you like the kid. So the kid had the teacher pegged, and I wouldn't have wanted to work for her either if I knew she didn't like me and was just piling work on, all that mess. Don't sweat the small stuff, and almost everything is small stuff. When we think about normal, especially these last couple of years, what's normal? I walked into a classroom last year as the teacher, or 2000 as the teacher. I had not been in a classroom as a teacher for 20 years. I've been an administrator, and then I've been out in the real world. So things were different, very different. And then I find out, I'm teaching, but I'm teaching on a computer, and all my kids are at their houses, and I'm trying to figure out this thing called Google Classroom. Nothing was normal. So you've just got to move on. You can't sit around and think, well, in my day we did. It doesn't matter in your day what happened. This is what's happening right now. The classes I teach don't look anything like the classes that you teach. It's okay, because what's normal in my class is not normal in your class, but that's okay. Pick your battles. The way we decide which behaviors we really need to work on first are the ones that annoy us the most. So we choose that battle, we choose that behavior, and we work on that behavior until we get it fixed. We work on that behavior until we've extinguished it and replaced it with a better behavior. In all that, we talk about what can this student realistically do, like we mentioned in the last one, and what is your level of tolerance? Can you put up with that? Anybody ever worked in a classroom of deaf kids? Anybody had that? Nope. What I was amazed at with the deaf kids is how noisy the classroom is, because they don't hear it. It doesn't bother them. So they're all making all sorts of noises, moving the furniture, everything. They can't hear it, or they're making sounds that they don't hear, and it doesn't bother anybody else because they don't hear it either. And it took a while to get used to all that noise in that classroom. You have to figure out what is your level of tolerance, and is this really about their behavior? Is this really about my level of tolerance? We had this last week. Don't get in a power struggle with a child, but if you do, don't lose. Oops. And then in the big scheme of eternity, does it really matter? I hear teachers crap about all the paperwork or all the meetings that we have, or the annoying behaviors from students that we have to put up with, or the pressure that we're getting from the administrators. The only reason you're getting pressure from the administrators is they're getting pressure from above them, and it just all runs downhill. And then you put pressure on the kids, and it just continues. The curse words, if that's a big bother to you, the pay, the lack of respect, the lack of support, and all these things are huge. But if you think about it, in the big scheme of eternity, do those things really matter? If I get the opportunity to work with kids, if I get the opportunity to change lives, are these things really that important that I can't just put up with these for the opportunity to get to make a difference in the life of a child? The thing we really need to do, I say beware of the teacher's lounge, because when I was a young teacher, I've been teaching so long that when I first started, you could smoke in the teacher's lounge. I mean, if you were a teacher. And so part of the teacher's lounge is smoking, part of it not. But I found out that the teacher's lounge was a dangerous place, not just from the smoke, but every day I'd go in there at lunch and I would hear teachers griping. And I'd hear teachers saying, man, if they just change that muffler, I'd retire tomorrow. I hate these kids. These are the worst kids we've ever had. Are you being edified and exhorted whenever you're around other professionals? If not, it's going to wear you down. So you want to find positive, excited colleagues. I finally moved a table into my room, and I invited my mom, of course, because she brought lunch. And then I invited other positive teachers, colleagues, and we would have lunch together. And it became kind of a, friend time and cheer session, rather than the teacher's lounge where it was just negative, negative, negative. Reality check. Again, sometimes we think, what's the reality of this? I had a kid that I worked with that every Tuesday, her chore at home was to dig out the outhouse. They had a porta potty, but it wasn't one they had rented. It was an old one that they got, and there was just a hole under it that they dug out. They lived in one of those little buildings that you buy at Home Depot out in the parking lot. That's what the family lived in. And the only running water they had was outside in a little shower that they had made, where the water just ran on the ground. And then they had this porta potty. So every Tuesday, this girl had to go home and dig out the porta potty. That's kind of a reality check, the kind of kid that you're working with. Sometimes we just need a good swift kick in the seat. When I start looking over the years at when I had a tough time in class and the kids weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and all that, 99% of the time I could find the problem by looking in the mirror, because I was not at the top of my game. So sometimes you just need that, oh man, get yourself going. And that's what a lot of teachers need is that reminder to stay on top of it. Personality, some kids are hard to love. I get it. Those are usually the kids that need it the most. And the old saying, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think every teacher needs to be involved. You need to go to games. It makes such a difference if you can walk into class the next day and say, hey man, that spike you got in that volleyball game last night, that was awesome. The performance. hey, I came to your play, man, that was really a neat play. You did a great job. I didn't even recognize you at first in your costume, that kind of thing. And then the hallways. You need to be interacting with the kids in the hallways. And I would take time and walk down to the cafeteria, see what's up in the cafeteria. Just let the kids know that you know about them, you want to know about them, and you care about them. And we need to get an adult perspective of fair. Real often, I'll hear teachers say, well, I can't do that for that kid, a kid that needs a modification or accommodation. I can't do that for that kid because I'm not doing it for all the kids. And my thought on that is, I've been trained in CPR. I know how to use a AED, all that kind of stuff. But if somebody I'm standing there with falls out, I'm not going to say, oh, well, I could revive that person, but I can't do it for everybody, so I'm not going to do it for them. No, they're the ones that need it, so I'm going to do it for them. The kid that needs the accommodation, the kid that needs the extra help, I'm going to do that for them. And that's fair because every other kid, if they needed it, I would do it for them. So we have that idea of fair, that fair is giving everybody the same thing. Well, I can go with that as long as by the same thing, you mean I'm giving every kid what they need. Next random thought, where are you during passing periods? When the kids are in the hallway, get out there, get in the middle of it. Make them walk around you. It does a lot of things. It shows that you're not scared of them. They don't own the hallways. You're right in the middle of it with them. It gives you the opportunity to high five the kid or talk to the kid that you don't see all the time. It might give you the opportunity to see a kid that's, you have seen that look before. He's about to get in trouble. Hey man, what's up? Let's talk about this. Let's get you calmed down. Don't do anything stupid. So spend time where the kids are. Get and keep their attention with relevant, engaging lessons. If you're bored in class, they're bored in class. Understand the power of relationship. In the one of the DAPs that I'm working in right now, there's this kid there who goes by Mississippi. And first day that I was in there, he had his head down on his desk and he was sleeping, and I walked by and patted him on the back and said, wake up, get back to work, Mississippi. And he said, don't touch me. Well, I walked in there today and I walked right up to him, patted him on the back, said, hey, Mississippi, how's it going? There was none of that gruff stuff about don't touch me. He's cool. I've got a relationship with him now where he understands that when I touch him, it's nothing bad, and he allows it now. But I shouldn't have touched him at first when we didn't have that relationship. So you got to think about that. My big story on that involves the mouse and the push pin. When I was at Fort Worth with the day treatment program, had two kids named Nick and Chris. And I walked into class one day. Again, I'd gone down the hall and I came back in, and Nick had pulled the mouse out of the computer and he had it around Chris's neck and he was choking Chris with it. And Chris was turning blue, and Chris was one of those kids that really didn't have many brain cells to spare. So, and the campus monitor was in there and he kept yelling at Nick and saying, let him go, just kept yelling and kept trying to force him to stop choking Chris. And I walked in, I put my arm on Nick's shoulder and I got down in his face and I said, hey, Nick, give me the mouse. Nick looked down at the mouse in his hands and realized what he was doing. And he just picked the mouse up real quick and handed it to me. And he just collapsed right there on the floor. If he had no clue what he was doing. Now, the reason that happened is because the relationship that I had with Nick. The reason it wasn't working for the campus monitor is he had no relationship with Nick. What I knew about Nick is that about a month before, we'd gotten a new kid in class, and this kid's name was Johnny. Johnny walked into class. He pulled a push pin off of my bulletin board. He pierced his ear with it. And then he turned and looked at the class and he said, "My name's Johnny. Don't nobody mess with me." Well, in a couple of days, he and Chris got into a fight. And so my aide got Chris, who she had a great relationship with, and she got Chris out of the room. I was standing in front of Johnny so that he wouldn't continue the fight and wouldn't run after him. And I hear Johnny yelling, "You want some of me? You want some of me?" I think he's hollering at Chris. What I don't realize is he's talking to me. He's trying to get me in a fight. Nick, the kid that I was talking about that I got the mouse from, all of a sudden out of nowhere, he comes flying across the desks and he lands right on Johnny's chest, throwing him over the table, and he puts his finger in his face and says, "Don't nobody mess with my teacher." We had a relationship. And part of that relationship involved he took care of me, I took care of him. You also cannot allow victimization in your class. Yeah, some kids are weird. Some kids are hard to like, but you can't allow the other kids or you as an adult to victimize them. So we talk about getting their attention, keeping their attention, teaching cooperation, teaching compensatory behaviors, teaching social skills, being consistent. I've had kids before, they'll ask a question, I'll give them my answer, and they're like, "You always say that." Yes, I'm consistent. You're going to get that same answer from me. Maintain proximity. There's this little halo of good behavior that follows teachers around the classroom. You don't believe it? Go watch a classroom sometime. If that teacher's sitting behind the desk over here, the kids over there are going to be acting the worst. Teacher gets up, moves over there, those kids are being good, somebody else. You need to be aware of what's going on. You know, don't get so hung up in your computer or whatever else is going on. Be aware of what's going on so that you can see the things that are happening. I was telling Lisa, and I don't have time to go into this whole story, but I had a kid today that was telling the other kids that he had snuck a dab pen into school today. And he was telling them all how he did it while I'm standing there. And they think, you know, he's an old man. He doesn't know what's going on. I just pulled out my phone and I'm recording it. And I lay my phone there on the desk and recording this whole thing as he explains to them how he was able to sneak in this dab pen and all the different chemicals that went with it and all this. And, you know, so like, be aware. And then this whole idea of withedness, you know, kids, one of the things I thought, I'm going back to teaching. I'm 59 years old working with kids that are actually the age of my grandkid. And is there any way I'm going to be able to build relationships? Well, they found out, hey, he's all right, you know, pretty with it. They began to think it was cool. So it doesn't really matter how much you have in common with them, as long as they know that you care about them and that you're trying hard. I think we'll hold off on this, Lisa, the de-escalation, just because it's getting so late and this is really important stuff.
Okay, so mark that in your materials and we'll pick up there next time and with what we have for next week, okay? All right, any questions, ladies? Our numbers have dwindled, but that's what we expected tonight. We had a lot of information. I appreciate y'all for hanging with us. And if you've got, I've had a couple of questions about due dates, and what I've explained to a couple of people that have asked is that we're taking modules that were put together by the previous professor and adapting them. And so there have been some errors, and we've tried to correct those as soon as they were brought to our attention or as soon as we noticed them. So forgive us when there are errors, and we'll take care of them as soon as we can. But I'm not super rigid on those kind of things. If you need an extra day or something to take care of an assignment, you know, that's not the kind of thing that I get too caught up about. If you don't do any assignments all semester, then there's an issue, you know, but if you know, you need an extra day. You're all working professionals and I don't get hung up about an extra day or two. If you
That
need, a
goes
little
with
bit.
don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I don't, you know, sometimes it takes me a few days to get stuff taken care of. And so I certainly understand that in a busy professional life. So, Summer pointed out to me today that the group project is due on Easter Sunday. So we'll, you know, push that to the next day or so. I think a lot of you have Monday off after Easter. So we'll make that due on Monday. But, you know, if you can't get it done till the next day, you know, we're not going to grade it on Monday and give you a 0 if you don't get it, you know, turned in. It's just not that critical. So you get it turned in sometime in the next couple of weeks, you know, we're good. Okay. So don't let that kind of thing freak you out. Those of you who have me all the time know that already. I'm not keyed up about that kind of stuff. So if you have questions about a date or an assignment or something, shoot me an email and we'll work it out. All right. All right. It's good to see y'all tonight.
Thank you.
Take
Thank y'all for
care.
being here.
Have a good week.
Bye.
And Rachel, I'll see you Friday. All right. Bye-bye.